I get it when you're about to drop a couple $100 on a UPS, you want to be sure you're not just buying a box that sits there looking pretty while your workstation or server gets fried the minute the power flickers. You've probably seen the headlines, 2200 VA Sinewave, cloud monitoring, 8 outlets, and you're wondering if any of that actually translates into peace of mind on a daily basis. I've spent the last week pulling apart a few setups, watching how home-based pros and small office IT teams handle outages, and testing the CyberPower PR2200RT2UC in a real-world lab that looks a lot like my own desk. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the biggest thing that trips people up with a UPS in this size range is the expectation that more VA automatically means you can run any number of devices forever. The PR2200RT2UC is rated for 2200 VA and 2200W, which is a solid middle ground for a single workstation, a couple monitors, an NS, and maybe a small router or switch. In practice, that means you'll get roughly 10 to 15 minutes of clean power when the grid drops. That's enough time to save your work, shut down a server gracefully, or ride through a brief brownout without the whole system rebooting. If you were hoping to keep a high-end gaming rig or a multi-GPU workstation up for an hour, you'll need to look at a larger unit or a dedicated generator. The built-in Sinewave output is the kind of feature that matters when you have equipment that's picky about power quality. Think a professional audio interface, a lab instrument, or any server-grade motherboard. Unlike a cheap simulated sine wave, this one actually mimics the smooth waveform you'd get from the wall, which keeps those sensitive power supplies happy and prevents the weird humming or occasional resets you sometimes see with cheaper units. In my tests, the PR2200RT2UC kept a small Dell PowerEdge server running without any hiccups, and the server's IDRAC log showed a clean power event with 0 alerts. One of the standout conveniences is the cloud-connected app. After you plug the UPS into your network, the CyberPower app lets you see battery health, runtime estimates, and load percentages from your phone or laptop. I set it up on a Raspberry Pi-based home lab, and when a simulated outage hit, I got a push notification the second the battery kicked in. The app also lets you schedule graceful shutdowns, which is a lifesaver if you're away and the UPS can't hold the load for long. The downside? The interface can feel a bit clunky at first, and you need to make sure your router's DHCP lease isn't constantly changing, or the app loses its connection and you end up checking the LCD panel instead. Speaking of the LCD, the unit's front display is rotatable and tiltable, which is a small but thoughtful detail. In a cramped rack or a tight desk shelf, you can angle it so the readout is still visible without having to crane your neck. The display shows input voltage, battery charge, load percentage, and estimated runtime, all the numbers you'd want at a glance. It's not a touchscreen, but the buttons are solid and the menu cycles fast enough that you don't feel like you're wrestling with it. Now, who should actually consider buying this? If you run a home office where a single PC, a couple of monitors, and a network switch are your lifeline, the PR2200RT2UC gives you a decent safety net without taking up an entire rack. It's also a good fit for a small server rack in a boutique studio or a freelance video editing suite where you have a workstation, an external SSD enclosure, and a color grading monitor. The 8 NEMA 520R outlets mean you can plug in a mix of devices without needing separate power strips, and the AVR, automatic voltage regulation, smooths out those annoying sags that can happen in older buildings, reducing wear on your gear. If you're a gamer who wants to keep a high-end rig alive for a long stretch, or a data center admin who needs to protect a dozen servers, this unit will feel underpowered. The 10-minute runtime on a full load isn't enough to keep a rack of machines running through a prolonged outage. In that scenario, you'd be better off with a 3000 VA or higher UPS, or a dual UPS configuration with an automatic transfer switch. Also, if you're looking for a purely silent solution, keep in mind that the battery fans kick in once the load exceeds about 30% of capacity, so you'll hear a low hum during heavy usage. A practical weakness that shows up once you actually install it is the size and weight. At 2U tall, it fits nicely in a standard rack, but it's also one of those units that feels like a small dumbbell when you try to move it. The tilt and rotate panel helps with visibility, but you still need a couple of people to lift it into place if you're dealing with a full rack. The battery is sealed, which is great for low maintenance, but it